Hello, I'm Adam J. Morgan, and welcome to Late Night Ghost Stories. On tonight's show, we have Chris Howley, paranormal investigator and TV historian. Since 2006, Chris has managed paranormal investigations at Woodchester Mansion near Stroud. Numerous radio appearances, TV appearances throughout the year, and doing your own private investigations as well. You sound very, very busy, Chris.
Yeah, a little bit too busy, Adam. It's Woodchester Mansion is my main work in the paranormal, which is literally, well, at the moment it feels like every week. Very, very busy venue. I've been looking after that since 2006, although I did start investigating 3 years earlier than that, in 2003. That was one of the first buildings I investigated on my journey into the paranormal.
And I just want to ask, before we move on to Woodchester Mansion, because that's quite a long subject that I want to have a little in-depth conversation with you about, not only the history, but also the haunted history as well. But before that, I was going to ask you, have you ever seen a ghost, and when and where did you see it?
I've seen 5, which sounds a lot, but they were all in Woodchester Mansion, 5 different ones, and they're the ones I can't explain and just don't know what they were.
Wow. So have you ever seen one outside of that? On, because you said to me earlier before we started recording that you're doing you did a traveling investigation where you went in a camper van.
Yeah, we travelled the UK last year around various haunted locations. Didn't actually see anything, but again, we did have some strange things that happened that we can't explain. I try and be as skeptical as I can, but on the road trip I was working with my partner Lucy, she is descended from the Pendle Hill Witches and is quite a talented medium. Now, that's me as a skeptic saying that, because I was having a chat with Richard Felix last year about talking about mediumship and having got with Lucy. I said, I'll play test the medium, and he said, no, you're not allowed to do that. He said, why do we always test the medium? I said, well, that's my skepticism. But yeah, I mean, she picked up on a fair bit on the trip, and although at the time I wasn't actually feeling anything, reviewing the footage, things were happening.
So what would happen? You'd both arrange to go to a location. You'd pull up with your camper van and stay overnight, or a couple of nights.
What we do, we started off in Yorkshire, where Lucy's from, and she didn't know where we were going. Basically, I'd organised and booked all the locations.
Oh wow, brilliant!
So I didn't want her to know anything. And when I went in, Derby Jail was actually our first location, and she sat in the camper van while I went in and recorded an interview with Richard Felix about the history of the jail. So she didn't have a clue about anything, and she'd pick up on things that she shouldn't know.
Wow. And what's the plan for the show? You said it's in the edit earlier to me, so any plan?
Yeah, it's a very, very long edit. I'm finding that the amount of footage that we shot on this trip, it's hours and hours that I've got to try and condense. Initially we were gonna put it as an idea to a TV company. Look, would you be interested in this sort of concept for a TV show? But then I'm thinking, well, actually, we've got so much footage. I might just condense it down and just put it down as some YouTube episodes.
Oh wow, that sounds amazing! I'd love to watch that. I'm into anything like that. I've always been fascinated with paranormal investigations, and that sounds like a dream. I wish I had the time. I would love to do that. Just get in a camper van and just go from location. How many locations did you go to, Chris?
Oh crikey! I think it was only 12 in the end.
That's still a lot. That's a lot.
I hadn't sort of factored in the actual mileage and how tired we were going to be after a drive. So, but yeah, it was an interesting 6 weeks. I mean, some locations were quiet. Nothing's guaranteed in the paranormal, as you know.
No.
But then I thought Derby Jail was quiet until I got to the edit, and there are things on there that thought that's strange. Don't actually remember seeing that, but it was picked up on camera. So
and that makes it very creepy, doesn't it? When you're reviewing the footage, it's a very quiet location, and all of a sudden you're seeing lights and orbs and hearing sounds.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, sounds as well that were coming out. I was actually stopping the video and rewinding and putting the sound through some software just to enhance it, see actually what we got. It's quite interesting going back over it, but I'm still nowhere near to finishing any of the edit yet. I'll get there though. I will get there.
And moving over to Woodchester Mansion, can you talk to people that's listening that might not know any of the history of the mansion? Firstly, the history of the actual mansion, but then secondly, the alleged hauntings that are happening there.
Yeah, well, Woodchester Mansion is a Victorian building that was started in 1850. It came to its unfinished state in 1870 on the death of the owner, William Lee. The death of two of his daughters first, but closely followed by William Lee himself. Now, people used to ask me, well, why didn't his family carry on with the build and move in? And I think the mystery of the mansion is what it was going to be used for, because it definitely wasn't going to be the family house. Because during the construction of the mansion, the Lee family were living in a building on the opposite side of the valley called Scar Cottage. And during the build of Woodchester Mansion, Scar Cottage had been extended in excess of 16 times. That was the main family home. So I think with the mansion, I know William Lee was high up in the Freemasons, and the family were also devout Catholics. So it could have been used as a place for private Catholic worship. But I think it was going to be a Grand Lodge for Freemasons. And the reason for that is the building is built on top of an old Georgian manor house called Spring Park. And the architect said to William Lee, look, you need to build this new manor house in the middle of the valley. It's built out of locally quarried limestone, and it is susceptible to water damage, so it needs sunlight on all four sides. He was adamant it had to be built on top of the Georgian building, which means that the north face of Woodchester Mansion now sits embedded into the wooded bank. So we get an awful lot of water damage on that side of the building. But just outside the back door, just into the bank, is a Victorian tunnel that was built during the same time. So we've now got a building with secret access to the rear. So I think that would have been for the Freemasons to enter the building secretly.
I was just going to say as well, I've been to Woodchester Mansion quite a few years ago, and I've done some investigations and stuff. I'm fascinated by the history. There was a tank that sank into the lake when they were doing testing. Was that during the Second World War?
Yeah, during the Second World War, we had an American and Canadian military doing exercises prior to D-Day. Now, the bathroom in the mansion, I know, was used as the officers' room as a planning centre. So that's where all the exercises were planned. I don't know if that coincides with one of the phenomena in the bathroom. People often report hearing music being played of Glenn Miller style, like the big band sound. So I don't know whether that's anything to do with the officers that would have sat listening to music while they were planning exercises. But the park was used for the main exercises, and particularly the series of lakes that run through the valley. And you're right. One afternoon, the military were down there strapping canoes together and putting a metal road over the top of them. And a tank did go over, unfortunately killing several of the troops during that afternoon. I have had that confirmed by the American military. There's the American Air Force base they actually came from was the one in Lincolnshire, and I had a phone call from a chap back in 2010 who had a paranormal team based there, and they themselves had come across the story and all the records from when this accident happened, and they were interested in coming down to do an investigation. And so they brought a lot of information down for me. But I think the biggest thing was the confirmation, yes, this accident did happen.
Wow. And are any of the soldiers alleged to haunt the place, or is it just the music?
No, you got the music has been picked up in the past. Soldiers, people commonly pick up on soldiers, particularly round by the mortuary. It's alleged that the bodies maybe would have been stored in the mortuary in the building prior to being shipped back home to America or Canada, where they come from.
And it's not just seeing, is it? There's alleged to be quite a lot of poltergeist activity, stone throwing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, do you know what? It's interesting. I was only talking about this to somebody the other week. When I first started investigating back in 2003, I was very skeptical back then. I didn't really believe in ghosts and hauntings. But that was the first thing that happened. It was the second or third investigation in. We were stood, we'd just gone out on a break, so outside, and it was as we were walking back into the building, about to turn left down the chapel corridor, that a stone forcibly came out and ricocheted off the back wall. My first thought was it was the caretaker, Andy Fryer, who was playing a joke on us.
Wow.
But ran down the corridor, nobody there. So I couldn't find Andy in the building. I went up to his flat, knocked on the door. He was out. He didn't actually get back into the mansion till gone 12 that night. So the next thing I tried was going down the corridor to see, because obviously if it had been hoax, the time it took me to run down there, they had to have been down the bottom end of the corridor. I tried to throw a stone from down there to hit the back wall, and it's physically impossible because of the height of the doorways.
Right. Okay.
You can't get the trajectory or the force to get a stone to hit the back wall from down there. So that was my first experience of the stone throwing.
I love the fact you kind of try and, like you said earlier, rationalize everything. You want to sort of check everything out to make sure, is there some way a stone could have fallen, or is it someone playing a prank?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's only when you can do that, rule everything out, you can then say, well, actually, I don't know. So I say, I would then say, I class that as paranormal. But others would say, yes, a ghost or a spirit. But I mean, is it what is a paranormal? I don't think we truly know yet, do we?
No, and that is the problem. There's so many different theories, and I'll be honest, I thought the cellars in Woodchester Mansion were very, very creepy. I actually went in the summertime, maybe 10 years ago, with my cousin, and we went down there, and trying to put it into words, we both felt very uncomfortable down there, like almost being watched, but just an unease, I would say. Yeah.
It is a strange place, the cellars, particularly the vaulted room. Do you remember the room in the corner with the pillar?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, that room in particular. I mean, there's dark and there's dark. Down in that vaulted room, there are window lights at ground level, which obviously you're underground. They're above your head, but they do allow ambient light, so you can just make out in the dark the outline of the pillar. But on occasions, there's this blackness that comes into that room. It's experienced countless times. Even the most recent time, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was working with Haunting Nights, running a vigil down there with a group of their clients, and it happened then. They were all saying, crikey, it's got really dark. I mean, the darkness, you cannot even see your hand in front of your face. It goes pitch black, and almost on command, sometimes you can say, "Look, can you leave us?" And the ambient light comes back, and you can then see the outline of your hand. It is quite a strange area.
What do you know? I need to ask you this because my cousin said earlier when we were talking about Woodchester, he said, "Oh, make sure you ask Chris
Yeah.
what is the history in that kitchen," because I remember we took some pictures in the kitchen area, thinking, "Oh, it looks like an old Victorian stove or whatever you want to call it," and pretty normal picture, except from there was a load of orbs all around us in that sort of area. Does anyone else get anything like that, or do you know about the history of that kitchen?
I do. The main thing about that kitchen, which is quite a unique feature of the mansion, is um, you remember I was talking about Spring Park, the Georgian manor house. Yeah. The stone flagstones are the original flagstones in that kitchen from the Georgian building. So I always say to people, if there's such a thing as stone tape theory, this is where it would be in the mansion, because these stones were laid around 1725, whereas the mansion was built in the 1850s. So this literally is the oldest part of the building. And the energies in that area are different.
I suddenly remembered you said you saw 5 ghosts. I'm assuming different ghosts and all over the mansion in different locations, or?
Yes. Yeah. The one actually was quite recently. When I get small groups down, I use the mansion tea room as a base room, which is directly opposite the kitchen. And that set of corridor there between the tea room and the kitchen is quite a strange area of the mansion. I was sat in there one night, the door was open, middle of winter, and I saw somebody walk past the door in a silhouette. I just naturally assumed it was one of the team. There was only about 7 of them in the building. I just thought it was one of the team had just wandered off and was just exploring. A couple of minutes later, I heard this metallic banging, and I thought, he's up to something. He shouldn't be doing that. I better go and check what he's doing. I walked out and up into the top end of the corridor, and there was nobody there. So the person I'd watched walk past. There's no way out. When you walk past that tea room door, it goes to a dead end area, and there's no way they could have got out. And there was nobody there. And the only thing that I could recreate the sound with was some stacked chairs. And if I moved one of the chair legs up and down, it was the noise I'd been hearing. So the chairs had been moving. I'd seen the person, whoever it was, walk past the door. And when the group come back in 20 minutes later, I double checked and I said, "Did any of you come past the tea room 20 minutes ago?" And they all said no. They'd all been doing a group vigil, all of them in the cellar, and they'd only just come up.
How did that make you feel?
It was the thing. I'm used to it now. So I'm just like, okay then. Years ago, I was a little bit more hairs on the back of the neck. Oh, crikey, what is it?
Have you ever been there at night on your own?
Not briefly, yeah.
Would you? Okay, next question. Would you stay the night on your own?
Do you know what? Last night, driving home from the mansion, I had an idea to raise money for charity, because being sort of custodian of the building while I'm down there, looking after the place, I'm quite lucky I've got Wi-Fi, so I can contact emergency services if I need to, because there is no telephone signal in Woodchester Valley.
I've noticed, yeah.
You literally are in the middle of nowhere. Wouldn't it be a good idea if I could, for charity, set up some fundraiser and do a live solo investigation of Woodchester Mansion?
That would be amazing, and I would definitely be watching that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea does fill me. I've never actually investigated. I've done lone vigils, but I've never actually investigated the whole building while empty. So I don't know. Yes, it's. But yeah, if I was doing it for charity and I knew there was a lot riding on it, I'd certainly give that a go. So that was only an idea I had last night. So the answer to your question, I guess, is maybe.
Maybe. Oh, wow. And I don't want you to list all your different ghosts, because you've mentioned one that you've seen, and I won't ask for all five. But what about
Yeah.
one of the other ones as well? What else have you seen?